Fun fact, op de eerste date met mijn vriend vroeg hij om mijn Nederlands te horen en de eerste zin die ik kon verzinnen was letterlijk: Hello, Danielle here. Over the last 4 years, I have made it my life's mission to learn Dutch. I think it's going to be a lifelong process for me, but I can honestly say that after 4 years, I'm super proud and happy with how far I've come. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 things I did which I believe were key in my success with learning Dutch. Hopefully, you'll learn something that you can also apply to your language learning. I will do the first one in Dutch, so you can hear exactly how my Dutch sounds after 4 years. Let's get into it. Nummer 1. Toen ik voor het eerst naar Nederland verhuisde, woonde ik op een paar minuten loopafstand van een Febo. En altijd als ik geen zin had om te koken, liep ik naar de Febo om iets lekkers te bestellen. En na een paar maanden zei ik tegen mezelf: weet je wat, je moet gewoon in het Nederlands gaan bestellen. Dus een van mijn eerste zinnen in het wild in Nederland was: mag ik een kipburger met frietjes? Fun fact, op de eerste date met mijn vriend vroeg hij om mijn Nederlands te horen en de eerste zin die ik kon verzinnen was letterlijk: mag ik een kipburger met frietjes? Wat hij heel erg grappig vond, want ik woonde maar een paar maanden in Nederland en blijkbaar was dat een belangrijke zin voor mij. Nou, hartstikke leuk, maar elke keer was ik super trots op mezelf met het bestellen, maar kwamen ze weer met een nieuwe vraag. Saus bij de friet, klein, middel of groot, enkel of dubbel, gaat het zo mee, etcetera, etcetera. En in het begin wist ik niet echt welke vragen ik kon verwachten. En eigenlijk elke keer als ik een nieuwe vraag hoorde die ik niet kon verstaan, moest ik weer beginnen in het Engels. En dit gebeurde keer op keer gedurende maanden lang voordat ik dit hele gesprek doorheen kon zonder over te schakelen naar Engels. Nummer 1 is dus, ik sprak voordat ik er klaar voor was. En ik moet eerlijk zeggen dat in het begin het helemaal niet leuk was om naar de Febo te gaan. Want ik moest super scherp zijn om ervoor te zorgen dat ik goed luisterde en goed kon reageren op alle vragen. Maar dit is volgens mij een beetje hoe het gaat met het leren van een taal. In het begin probeer je en faal je heel veel. Maar als je het niet probeert, dan krijg je ook niet de kans om van elke interactie iets nieuws te leren. Je kan dus niet tegen jezelf zeggen: ik spreek wel als ik er klaar voor ben. Omdat je er niet klaar voor bent zonder dit proces door te lopen. The second thing I did was speak with native speakers as soon as I could and implement their feedback. And this for me was probably one of the hardest things I did while I was learning Dutch, but one of the most important. Most Dutch people that I've come across living in the Netherlands for the last 4 years have been pretty happy to help expats with their Dutch in the right setting. In fact, most Dutch people, when they hear you're learning Dutch, well, their first question is usually, why are you learning Dutch? But after that, they're usually pretty happy and enthusiastic to speak with you and will start speaking to you in Dutch right away. But I really do stress that this has to be in the right setting. A lot of us are really bummed when Dutch people switch to English on us when we're trying to practice our Dutch. But honestly, I have to say this is just something you have to accept in the beginning as a beginner. Instead of being really bummed out by this, I think you just have to be a little bit more creative and deliberate in how you get your conversation practice in. I was lucky because I have a Dutch-speaking partner at home, so if you have that too, take advantage of it. And I know it's not possible to go from 0 to 100 right away and just say, let's speak Dutch from now on. That's completely impractical, but try to pick some moments, like say, let's try to speak Dutch with each other when we're in the car or when we're preparing dinner or in a specific room, for example. But I also had Dutch-speaking partners outside of the home. So I had a few coworkers who I would try to only speak Dutch with. In the beginning, it wasn't only Dutch, it was a mix, but eventually it became only Dutch. And I never showed up to the office one day saying like, hey guys, I'm only speaking Dutch from now on, because that's totally not who I am and totally not how I work. But I had a couple coworkers who were clearly more comfortable speaking Dutch, and I thought, okay, maybe those are the people who I can practice my Dutch with, and they were, of course, super happy to do that and help me every time I was stuck on words. So ask one of your Dutch coworkers or a fellow student if they'll be like a speaking partner with you. And you don't have to commit to 100% Dutch right away. Like maybe it just begins with 5 minutes. You do your catch up when you first see each other, and the rest can be in English or whatever language you speak together. But start somewhere. Whoever you can convince to help you, just let them know you want corrections and try to actually implement these corrections, because this is the only way you're going to prevent turning your consistent mistakes into habits. You can also ask your speaking partner to just speak as much Dutch to you as possible. So maybe the conversation gets to a point where you can't continue anymore in Dutch, and they can just continue slowly speaking to you and see how much you can understand while you've already switched back to your native language. Number 3. Out of everything I've done to learn Dutch up until this point, I think that listening to a lot of Dutch is the thing that has probably helped me the most. I've watched a ton of Dutch YouTube over this 4-year process and listened to a ton of podcasts and music, everything in the Dutch language you can imagine. And I honestly think this is probably one of the main factors contributing to the fact that I can speak Dutch as well as I do with a pretty good pronunciation. I've always been a big consumer of YouTube videos, so when I moved here, I basically just switched my normal content for Dutch content. And when you constantly hear people speaking the language about topics that you're interested in and topics that you understand, then things slowly start to sink in, like even de and het, which so many of us struggle with, understandably so. Even things like that start to slowly make connections in your mind. You're not even realizing it's happening, but a few years later, you want to use a word, and without even knowing why or how, you know if it's a de or het word. It just feels or sounds right to you after a certain point. And I think listening to Dutch is what really helped me in that aspect. If I really go back to the beginning, when I was watching Dutch vlogs in year 1, I was maybe understanding 50% of what they were saying. It was more just to get accustomed to the accent and the pronunciation and common words and just kind of, get myself used to the language. The very first things I listened to were actually podcasts, and I was doing that even when I was still living in Canada. I really recommend ones that are made for complete beginners. The best one, in my opinion, is called Zeg het in het Nederlands, and it's hosted by a woman who doesn't actually teach you Dutch, but she speaks really slow, clear Dutch, and she'll teach you things about like Dutch culture and holidays and traditions and things like that. It's really, really nice and slow paced, and you can hear all the pronunciations really well. This one helped me a ton in the beginning. So of everything that I've done, I think listening to a lot of Dutch whenever I could is probably one of the things that's helped me the most, and one of the things that separates my Dutch from that of some of my peers who were also learning Dutch around the same time as I was, and one of the reasons I got a lot further and my pronunciation and my grammar was better. And of all the methods I've used, this is still the one that I'm using today. I'm still watching Dutch vlogs, Dutch YouTube videos, following Dutch creators, and it still helps. Now, I know I said there were only 3 things, but I do want to mention one more thing, and it's probably a bit less concrete than the others, but it's worth mentioning anyway. I did not reach this level of Dutch by just taking the courses and doing the homework and doing the practice lessons and hoping for the best. I actually just completely fell in love with this language and immersed myself in every way you can imagine. I fell in love with that feeling of realizing that you're understanding something which a few months earlier you couldn't understand at all, or you're actually understanding a conversation that's happening next to you and you recognize all the words. It just felt like there was no better feeling than that. And that feeling when you've just left an interaction with someone and you think to yourself, oh my God, I actually just communicated with that person in Dutch, insane. And don't get me wrong, it has not been easy, and there were days and times when I hated the process and I was exhausted, never wanted to hear Dutch again. But my goals around learning Dutch were so clear that even these difficult things couldn't completely take me off track. If you truly want it and you're willing to do the work, then you have to know and understand that this process can sometimes really suck. And it's really hard, and you're going to feel stupid, and you're going to feel like you can't express yourself, and you're going to feel like, what am I even doing here? What am I even trying to accomplish? Who am I? But if you're serious about learning, then you're going to show up every day. Well, not every day, but you're going to show up most days, do the work, fail, get better, keep trying, keep doing the thing, because those moments that are really hard and those moments that really suck, that really make you feel like you don't know what you're doing, those are the ones that you need to grow the most. If you made it this far into the video, first of all, thank you for watching. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and let you know a little bit about what this channel is all about. My name is Danielle and I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I moved to the Netherlands at the beginning of 2020. And since I started living here, I've made it my mission to learn to speak the Dutch language. Not only did I find it personally important to speak the language of the country I was going to be living in, but I also took it as sort of a personal challenge. Despite the fact that I did grow up in Canada, I did not grow up in a French-speaking province, so the French that I learned in school for 12 years is completely gone. I've always been a bit bummed about that and always have wanted to learn a new language. When I started learning Dutch, I completely fell in love with it and became pretty obsessed and consumed just about every piece of content that I could find out there on learning Dutch. I wanted to hear the stories of what other people were doing and how they succeeded with learning the language. While there's definitely a lot of stuff out there online, I think there's a lot more room online for more content about learning Dutch. When I went to search, for example, like who are the Dutch-speaking YouTubers who I can follow and learn Dutch from as a beginner, I would literally get no hits, like nothing at all. So I had to do a lot of the legwork myself to find content that was suitable for my level at the time, which I also found personally interesting. I started a website called DIYDutch.com to help people find Dutch content online. And after writing there for a few years, I thought it was high time to share my experience on YouTube, the platform which 100% hands down has contributed the most to my ability to speak Dutch the way I do now. So what is this YouTube channel all about? This channel is going to focus on 3 things. Number 1, sharing my experience in terms of how I learned Dutch. So like what resources did I use? What courses did I find the most effective? How did I progress from level to level? Number 2 is to help you learn Dutch. So not in the form of grammar lessons or teaching you actual Dutch, because there are plenty of really good qualified people out there who can do that, but more to help you with like common expressions, tips about pronunciation, common mistakes to avoid, and things you can do to make your Dutch sound more native. And I want to help you find Dutch content that you love. Watching and listening to Dutch content is, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why I can speak Dutch as well as I do now. I want to help you find TV shows, movies, YouTube channels, podcasts, books, music, you name it, just Dutch content that you love. That's the reason why my website was called DIY Dutch and now this YouTube channel is called DIY Dutch. It's all about helping you find Dutch content that you love and that speaks to you the most so that you can also learn Dutch in a way that you like. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my videos. Now, if you're learning Dutch and you want to be able to speak Dutch the way I do, then you probably need some more practical tips that this video wasn't really able to offer you. You're going to want to watch this video next, where I go through year by year in detail exactly what courses I took, what books I read, music I listened to, etc., and what I actually recommend.